So good evening, a very, very warm welcome to each and every one of you. My name is Debbie Roberts and I am your host this evening. And I'm truly honoured to be here with you. Tonight we are expecting quite a lot of people, so I think more people are going to be joining as we go through. In fact, we have around 1,000 delegates booked on to what promises to be a very impactful and meaningful event. The webinar this evening, of course, is much more than just a conversation. It's a call to action, a space to educate and a moment to connect on a very sensitive subject, child-on-parent violence. Together, we're putting a spotlight on something that is actually rarely talked about. We're going to explore experiences and possible ways forward and add a bit to the growing community of understanding and support. If you're new to the Ollie Foundation, we are a suicide prevention charity launched in 2016 by 3 parents who, each having lost a son to suicide, pledged to prevent other families going through what they had experienced. Ollie is devoted to empowering individuals and organisations to reduce suicide in their communities through education, intervention and prevention. By providing the right support and knowledge, we're confident in our ability and yours to create a positive change and save lives, because as our name suggests, it's actually an acronym. One life lost is enough. Ollie. The support we offer ranges actually from delightful little curriculums for primary school children in our Planting the Seed and transition workshops for students moving from year 5 to 6 and 6 to secondary. And then our sort of critical transition talks for sixth formers moving on to university. We offer a range of wellbeing activities. Online, you can join us for our Zantangle, our mindful art sessions, or our Pilates. And in person, we host a community garden where you can simply hang out and enjoy fresh coffee, or you can actually tend the plot and learn about growing food and herbs for well-being. That's if you can get to St Albans, of course, where we're based. And of course, our range of talks and training around the nature of suicide, the history of suicide, prevention and intervention. We also have many novel resources like our prescription safe plan, which are there to support those of us who are on medications and very common medications without truly understanding or being aware just how many have suicidal thoughts as a side effect. Everyone here is deeply committed to the well-being and safeguarding of families that are facing challenges that are often unseen and unspoken. So it is my absolute privilege today to introduce you to our esteemed guests, Dr. Carrie Grant, MBE, and David Grant, MBE. Look, they need no introduction, but just in case there is anyone on the call who doesn't know, Carrie and David are BAFTA-winning broadcasters, world-renowned vocal coaches, and tireless advocates. Their remarkable careers actually span a number of decades, though it doesn't look that way, does it? And their support for others knows no bounds. Together, they have co-authored an incredible book, A Very Modern Family, sharing their personal and professional insights into navigating family life with authenticity and resilience. Beyond their professional achievements, Carrie and David are deeply connected to the heart of today's discussion. As parents to 4 wonderful children, 3 of whom have special needs, they bring a wealth of lived experience, wisdom, and compassion to the table. For over a decade, they have supported over 250 families with autistic girls and trans non-binary young people. Their advocacy has transformed countless lives, and we are so grateful to them for being here with us this evening. Now, tonight's session sold out within hours, so we know the need is huge. We also know this is a subject surrounded by fear, misunderstanding, and shame, yet it is one we have to explore with courage and empathy. This session is a safe space where we will learn, share, and grow together. Whether you're here as a professional parent or someone seeking understanding, you are part of a community that values kindness, solutions, and hope. So before we get started, let me cover the obligatory safeguarding and webinar housekeeping for our online space. Now, we know that feeling safe is not something everyone here feels all the time. And if at any point this evening it doesn't feel safe for you to be here or the content feels overwhelming, please step away and take care of yourself. We encourage respectful engagement through the chat. You've got the Q&A there. You can pop in questions that you might have, and we hope to answer as many as we can at the end of the session. Through our understanding, experience, and actionable insights, we hope to create a ripple effect this evening of change for families facing CPV. Let's lean into this moment with open minds and open hearts. Carrie and David are going to speak for around 45 minutes, perhaps up to an hour, and then we'll move into Q&A. And now, everybody, it is my absolute honour to welcome our panellists, our extraordinary guests, Dr. Carrie Grant and David Grant. Carrie, David, welcome. And let's just dive right into it. Would you be kind enough to share why you're here, why you're talking about child on parent violence, and some of your story in relation to this subject?
Yeah, thank you so much, Debbie, and thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's a real privilege. I think, as Debbie said, some of tonight, obviously this might be the first time you've sat and had someone talk about similar stuff to what you are facing. And so whether you're a parent or carer or professionals that, before David's going to just do a potted history, but I just wanted to take a moment to just give space to what we've all been through, because we're here, we're still here, and it's a lot, right? And I know this is a strange way of doing it, because all I can see is myself and Debbie and David on the Zoom, but I know that there's hundreds of you the other side of that screen. And so I just want to hold the space for a moment and say, we see you, we hear you, our stories chime with one another. We know what it is like to be on the underbelly of the underbelly, to be on that bit where not only are you not heard, but even those, when people attempt to help you, often it is about your child, which is of course really important, and you as a parent carer are completely left. And that sense of abandonment, that sense of how can I ever get any help? Will anyone step in? How will my life improve? I just want to name that and say, yeah, that is our reality. That is how we have felt. And holding the space for one another. Sometimes it's not about the solutions. It's just about sitting alongside one another and going, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
And if that's not us, currently there are 412 other people who are sitting there feeling that and know what you are facing, because they are facing similar stuff. So without further ado, David.
Yeah, I think that all of you will understand that when people say to you, what's the situation? What are you going through? What's happening? What's going on in your life? All you can ever do is give headlines, because to go into details, so sometimes it's just so traumatizing. Sometimes it's almost impossible to explain to people who haven't experienced the situation what you're going through without them asking loads of questions that really you've asked yourself, offering solutions that you've tried so often yourself. Yeah. But having said that, the only way that I can explain in a really short time why we're here and our connection to you and the fact that we are you is to give you some headlines. So let's see, where do we start? We have 4 children. And they are intersectional. They are so intersectional. Our children, they're mixed race, they're trans, they're queer, they're mixed heritage, they're neurodivergent, adopted in one case, but they're amazing. Beyond the problems, beyond the situations, beyond the challenges,
and they're not all problems. Some of those things are just part of their glorious identity.
Absolutely. They are amazing. But some of the issues we've had, our children, more than one of them have been in and out of school.
We're talking like 3 years out of school, not just a week off school.
Yeah.
Big stuff where there is no school.
There is no school. There is no school that would accept them for any number of reasons. I know some of you have been through that. Children with suicidal ideation, some of you have been through that, which meant days at a time on suicide watch, serious self-harm. And I know some of you have been through that. With our adopted child, by the time he was 5 or 6, we had incidents of classrooms being cleared because In a rage, he had thrown every piece of furniture. So the children and the teacher are standing outside in the rain, and people are afraid to actually go in. But the 5-year-old child, because of the damage that they're afraid he might cause them, because of the damage that's being caused, he kicked a teacher in the head and concussed her, knocked her out, broke a TA's fingers.
This is all at the age of 5.
Yeah. A little later on, but as a result of that, there were then parents getting together behind our backs, people who we thought were friends, people who we'd known at that school for a decade with our other children, trying to petition the head to get our child out. And some of you know and have experienced the loss of people who you thought were friends, the loss of people who you thought were your community.
That walk of shame
your
into
children.
the school every morning,
Yeah.
where you know I'm that parent that everyone's judging.
Absolutely.
And they're looking at my kid like my kid's a demon.
Yeah.
And, because it's horrible. They're written off, aren't they? And that we've really felt that. And to find out they'd done that petition was just, and I found out just as I happened to be sitting in a local authority meeting, and they said, well, we got the petition. And I was like, what? Sorry, what are you talking about? They said, yeah, all the parents that signed the petition. I mean, yeah, it's
to
hard,
discover
right?
all but one parent in the class had signed it.
That must have been awful for you.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's devastating because I think they just assumed that we would never know.
Yeah.
And then there was the new school, and
Was it
Prue, yeah, absolutely connected to the Tavistock, with lots of kids who were also traumatized. We got trauma therapy. We decided we'd learn things that would help us. We learned a bit of NPR.
So it was a bit of change at that point. That
Yes.
Nathan went to this new school. We were like, let's become trauma informed. We need
Yes.
to really, it's not the adoption training really wasn't cutting it at this point. We needed something a bit more in depth. So we got ourselves trained. We started doing non-violent resistance. Then we started holding non-violent resistance courses in our house. Let's just share it out there. Everything we learn, we're like, let's just share it. And please tell us, because we want to learn too. And if there's something that works, spread the word.
Absolutely, we want to know.
So and then we started saying, and NVR is really working for Nathan, but it doesn't work with autism. Nathan's not autistic, the other 3 are. So it works. How do you get that to work with autism? It's a different thing. So when someone's hitting you, that's that non-violent behavior, you kind of understand. But when you're talking, what about when the child's violence is towards themselves? Yes. How would you do non-violent resistance then? So we looked at how an autistic brain might work in that context.
So we learned NVR, and for those of you wondering what that is, non-violent resistance, we're going to be discussing it later and explaining it later. We had no violence in the home for a few years as a result of that. 5 years, and then lockdown happened.
Oh, by the way, there was loads of violence at school.
Oh yeah, constantly at school.
Just not at home.
But come home and it'd be like a spell was broken.
Yeah, so at school, like all emergency services would be called. We're talking teams of police with helicopters in the sky kind of situation. So big event violence. Yes. and then lockdown, sorry.
Yeah, okay. And lots of damage caused at school. And then back at school after lockdown, he was permanently excluded. And he now
So that was when the violence really returned home.
Yeah.
So during lockdown, we had no violence, wasn't at school. So no violence. Hang on a minute. We're going for 7 months, no violence. What happened in that space? That's the stuff. That's the piece of work that you're like, professionals work with us with that bit. Let's just look at what was happening in that moment, in that 7-month moment where there was no violence. What was happening that worked for this child, that there were no, because his violence only happens every 5 to 6 weeks. And when it does, it's all services on board. So he went back to school, like David said, permanently excluded. And then suddenly we're faced with a 12-year-old who's violent, very different to a little 5-year-old. And so it was just police around her every day.
Police were constantly here. We had the whole street full of police and ambulance and all this. And then, we were being really judged by the social services. Like, what did you do?
Judged by social services.
I'm sure we must be.
If you're here and you work for social services, thank you so much, because we know that in all of that health, education, social care, there are magical people who do great jobs, who are fighting impossible systems. But that's not always our experience. You guys, you're lovely. If you're willing to learn, we love you, like we're willing to learn. But there was so much judgment, and it was that I think that really broke us, actually. that really broke us. And we'd done 3 years on suicide watch with another child. We'd done 3 years out of school with another child. But the judgment of social services, I think that was just, I don't know. I think I still have, and that's going back, it kind of got easier 2 years ago, but I still, even today, will drive past certain places and go, yeah, the trauma is still sitting there. It's really difficult.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on one thing then, that it got so bad that we had security at the house provided by the local authority.
Yeah.
We had like security guards, full-time security guards living in our house.
2 burly guys knocking on your door. That's really going to work. They're sitting on your sofa all day long and your autistic kids are like, why have you got these big burly guys? And yeah,
the point is
untenable.
That's our story. For some of you, it's the opposite. For some of you, got kids who are angels at school and nobody actually believes you because they don't recognize the story that you're telling of your child. But the fact that you have violence in the home is what brought you here. And I just want you to know that we have shared that experience. We are you.
That's the headlines.
That's the headline.
Oh, and now our child, sorry, just to say, so that particular child is now in a therapeutic placement where he's been for 2 years. And that was the best thing for him and us and our extended family, the other siblings. Just to say, also, he comes home at weekends and we have a great time. And he'll be here at Christmas and it will be lovely. It's not the best situation. It's not what we would have wanted. Could it have been different? I believe so, yes, had we had early intervention. So now, you know, if they'd have spent a bit more money earlier on, we would have had better outcomes now. Instead, it's costing the local authority a lot of money. And that's not, we don't want this for children, do we? We don't want that for our children. So, you know, there's that horrible thing as well. If anyone has been in that situation where you are holding unbelievable grief for your child, and you are also holding incredible relief, which you feel terrible about because you're kind of relieved that I don't ever have to call the police again. I don't have to live hypervigilantly. I don't have to worry if there's something going to hit me on the head or punch me in the face, or I don't have to have my skull x-rayed. Again, this is not, I'm now safe.
That's not my life.
And there is something about that it's hard to hold that contradiction, but that's the kind of stuff we have to walk with. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing a glimpse of what the last few years have been like. You know, we have been, as an organisation, since we put this out, we've been inundated with emails, as you can imagine, people wanting to know about strategies, people who, like you, are saying, you know, we have this fear, the cracked skull, all the other things. Maybe, I know you're going to talk us through all sorts of things, but maybe we could start with the journey of how your parenting changed with one particular child in relation to the other children.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, the journey of how parenting changed is one of 2 very, very different journeys. We were on very different roads at very different paces. Do you want to start?
Well, I jumped ship, yeah.
Yeah, Carrie jumped in. Carrie just went
with absolute pride. Yeah,
you know, like
I was like, it's not going to work.
The good ship, typical parenting. Carrie jumped ship really early on, went, this isn't working. The kind of parenting that we got growing up, the kind of parenting that you give to, I suppose, neurotypical children, or, you know, Carrie was doing parenting from, you know, and I was doing parenting from the 70s, the parenting we got. It wasn't working for our kids. Carrie said, we need to find a new way. I said, no, we just need to do the old way harder. It's not working because, and I doubled down, and that caused a kind of divide between us as parents because we had very different views on things. You know,
for about a whole year and a half, we were on completely different pages.
Yeah.
And of course, because David wasn't committing to what I was doing, it meant that what I was doing wasn't really working. So then that justified him saying, well, it doesn't work. Well, I'm telling you, we need to go back to how we were doing it. And I think I mean, thank goodness, by the time all of this kicked off, we've been married 38 years, we've been together 38 years, married 36. And so we're talking about 30 years in, we had that kind of argument. And I think that's way harder if you're like only 10 years into your relationship. I dread to think what that would have done to us all those years ago. And I think that needs to be said. It's really hard on the relationship.
And that's why when things like this happen, the attrition rate in relationships is so high. People think, oh, you know, someone's abandoned someone else. It's not that. It's just that you find that the way that you think it should be done is so different. So we changed. Carrie changed it first, and I started thinking, well, look, what I'm doing, this old way isn't working. It's the only way I've got. What have you got?
Yeah, and I think actually a big part of that, and we've alluded to it already, but I think becoming trauma informed.
Absolutely.
There's this lovely phrase, what does it really mean? To really understand what is happening for your child. And I think for fostered and adopted children, if you're a parent, carer, special guardian, kinship, all of those relationships that we have to children, if your child is fostered or adopted, you're probably going to have been sent on some training. So there'd have been like touch bases on this is what trauma is, this is what attachment is. And you kind of go, yeah, I get that, I understand that. But we're talking about the deeper stuff, really how you get your head around what happens, the behavior of this child and how they're responding to the world, how they're viewing the world around themselves, how they're responding to that world, and how we are interacting with what's going on in their thinking. So what I do want to say is that so often we do concentrate on fostered and adopted children, but I know on this recording here with you guys here tonight, there will be people whose children are their birth children, who are they're suffering violence and abuse from. And so, and often they could be autistic. And then we're like, well, I don't want to put it, because I'm autistic, by the way. I don't want to put it out there that autistic people are like violent and abusive, because that's not true. But what I will say is this, I rarely meet a parent who's got an autistic child, birth or non-birth, who that child is not traumatized. So when we talk about trauma and foster and adoption, the children, it's a different trauma, but our children are traumatized by school. They're traumatized by not fitting in. They're traumatized by not hitting the marks, by feeling lost, by feeling like they're abandoned every morning to a classroom full of people who they don't relate to. So the trauma sits with all of our children.
Yes,
I would say that is probably the uniform thing for all of us as parents, is that the children that we are parenting, we're getting these responses from, the children are traumatized. So to begin to understand that is a really big part of it.
We've done a lot of talks before tonight on the trauma of relinquishment. And I think over and above that, what you're describing, you might say, oh, I don't like that term. So I'm going to put it anyway. Thwarted belongingness. I think there is this thwarted belongingness that everyone that you have described, not being able to fit in, not feeling connected, not belonging, whether it's the child or the parent, that sense, like you said, of going into a school each day and not feeling like you belong there.
Yeah.
So I know we're going to talk about strategies, and we're going to have lots of people sharing stuff, I'm sure. People just want it to stop, though, don't they? They just want it to go away.
I want it to stop. I just want it to stop. Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, we're going to go through some strategies now. And I think that just to say that every child is different and every parent is different. And so what we are saying is like, oh, look at us, we've got all the answers. That would just be so rubbish and not true.
Yes. Nobody has.
Whatever we say now, you might be sitting there going, well, yeah, right, I did that 10 years ago. And that's fine. What I don't like, and I don't know whether you've experienced that, but certainly we have, this was CAMs were brilliant. For one child, they were brilliant. Maybe they were good for a second one, but there were definitely moments they stepped in way too late in many situations. But the biggest thing, I think, was just, okay, let's talk to you parents about how to parent your child. We went on a course recently and we've got a new acronym, SWIM. Sit with your child is the S for swim. And you're just like, literally, honestly, like that's like the ABC level. I've done the ABC level, and the parents that we work with and we hang with, they're so on it. Like,
yes,
come on, you've got to come with some better stuff than that. So we are going to give you some non-violent resistance stuff. Some of it we've adapted to work for autism, so it's a hybrid. And then lots of other things we've learned along the way. And I feel like for our children, because they come from so many intersections, we've had to do that. So if we start with de-escalation, how do you get a child to stop when they're on the way up? How do you calm that down in a way that's safe and in a way that could we stop it before it gets to that point where a punch is thrown? Yeah.
Wow, that's a really big one, isn't it? I think that de-escalation is absolutely essential. Striking while the iron is cold. There's no point when somebody is up there coming up there to match them. When they're yelling, I mean, and this was part of the change. When they're yelling, I've got a louder voice than anybody else in the house. Don't try and yell at me because I can yell louder than you. That didn't actually work
Well, the
at
one that
all.
David was really, and I think I've done this as well, which is like, let me now just try and teach you a lesson while you're in the middle of this. You know what you need to do?
Exactly.
You need to calm down a bit. You know, no, who has ever calmed down by being told to calm down? No one, right?
Yes,
So,
and
this is
I
not-
would try to, and not every moment is a teaching moment. Whatever they say, it's not true.
It's not.
When someone's in the middle of a meltdown, I'd be trying to tell them, well, you know what you need to do. They can't hear it.
They can't calm
Exactly.
down. They can't be taught anything. They can't hear you. Actually, they can't really hear you. So the best thing that you can do is, if you're going to remain in the room, one of my advice is just get out the room. I'm going to leave you here. If you need me, I'm going to come back in a couple of minutes and I'll check in on you. They might follow you out the room, and I know that kids do that as well, but just trying to stay calm yourself, speaking at a really low level. I do think for parents, and we will talk about this later, this involves incredible dissociation, because everything in you wants to push back, whether that's shouting or just like, I'm about to be hit, I want to push. And that's the most natural human response. But if we can keep it as calm as possible, I'm not saying this always works, but I would say it works a lot for our children, particularly with Nathan. So to really de-escalate, there are so many, there's probably of the 100 incidents that have happened, there's probably another 2 million that, you know, could have happened. So it's really just low tone. Do anything you can to take that mood down, to try and reduce that if you can. Knowing that you are going to come back and strike while the iron's cold. So when people go, what do you mean you just let them trash their room? You just let them do that? Where are your boundaries? You're like, actually, because right now the boundaries are not important. Thank you very much. It's just about calming this child down. And so moving away from speaking in a calm voice, just speaking very little, actually, trying to listen, trying to hear. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in terms of talking, but striking while the iron's cold means hours later or the next day, you say, okay, can we talk about what happened yesterday? Can we just go over that? And then you have a little bit of a debrief on what happened. And what can I do to help you in those situations? Because I really want to get it right for you. And if I'm escalating it, I don't want to do that for you. So show me, tell me, did that annoy you? Did you want me to stay or leave? Was what I said, did I say the wrong thing? So taking your own responsibility helps them also to take responsibility. So striking while the iron's cold. The other thing I think we found super helpful was to not be working on 100 behaviors at one go.
Absolutely. We talked about the 3 boxes in our thing. You have a big box, which is all the bad behavior, everything that really you just think this needs to change. And then you have a middle box where you have just a couple of the key things, maybe 2 or 3 key things. And then you have your top box. Your top box is one behavior, and you are dealing only at any time with the top box. So for
that
instance,
bottom one, just to say, the bottom one will also have all that stuff that the neurotypical parents have. Yeah, like eat your greens. Let's just, do you know what? If they don't eat greens till they're 10, then they don't eat greens till they're 10 because I've got bigger fish to fry, right? So, so that stuff, just don't sweat the small stuff. Literally, it doesn't matter. They spend an hour and a half on their iPad or 2 hours and you're told only do an hour. Well, so what? That's what I would say. Next box up, as David said, you've got those behaviors like these are big challenges that need big ones that need looking at. That top box is your big one. Yeah. So for instance, you might come to our house. You're sitting having a cup of tea in our kitchen. Everyone does that in our house. Everyone's sitting having a cup of tea, coffee, around the table. Nathan walks in, let's say, this is back in the day, and Nathan says, F off, walks out the door, slams the door, stomps upstairs, slams the bedroom. You hear all of this, and then you see David and I go, and you think, cuckoo,
they've gone mad.
They've lost the plot. Right. But you see, for us, we had one behaviour, and that was stop punching mummy in the face.
Right.
So actually, the fact that he swore, slammed doors, stamped.
Yeah,
that's all the middle box. It's irrelevant. We're not dealing with that today.
So you let that child know this is the behaviour we are working on. Don't worry about the other stuff. We'll deal with that when we come to it. But the hitting,
one thing at a time.
It becomes something that you do together. So you discuss it and you're like, this is what we're going to do together. And so we started, for instance, Nathan used to do this thing, which is about 5, because it's when we started trauma therapy. So it would be 5 or 6. And he would come home from school and unbeknownst to us, he would pull his little trackies down and pee on the floor. So I kept going into different rooms going, sure, it smells of weeing. Oh my gosh, there's a puddle. So this isn't just a child wetting themselves. This is actual weeing pulling your trousers down and weeing. So this is before MVR. Before MVR, I was like, right, I've seen what you've done. You're on that naughty step. Sit there. You do not wee on the floor. That's disgusting. Right, okay. That didn't work. Right, you're going to go to your bed. Go and sit on your bed for weeing. Okay. Do you know what? I'm not tough enough. What I'm going to here's the kitchen towel. Go and wipe it up yourself. That was me pre-jumping ship.
Yeah.
So then.
And nothing really works. Nothing works.
And then I thought, I'm going to out-psych him. I'm going to wipe it up and say nothing. That didn't work. It still was a little puddle there. So in the end, we sat him down and we said, Nate, do you know what we've been noticing? Noticing this wee that just keeps happening in this room and that room. We just want to see, how do we help you to not do that? We want to work together with you on that, because that behaviour's got to stop. So how can we help you? He said, I'll come up with an idea. He didn't come up with an idea at that point, but it stopped overnight. It stopped. That literally, having the conversation stopped. We were like, this is absolute magic. I can't believe this, particularly with little children. That really, really works. So the next thing we did was, right, okay, punching mum in the face. That's got to stop. So we did a thing called a sit-in, or I did a thing called a sit-in. I went into the room, I sat there, because really non-violent resistance is about making a protest with your child. It's like taking your protest sign and going and saying, this has got to stop. So I went into the room, I was like, right, the punching me in the face, that's got to stop. And I want you to come up with an idea about a strategy of how you think you can make that happen. I mean, he was so angry that I'd even brought it up. He started throwing his toys at me and I was like catching them and just putting them behind my back. He started trying to take the mattress off the bed. I thought, oh no, he's going to throw the mattress at me and that might be a bit dangerous. But he couldn't lift it, fortunately. And then he said, then he got ridiculous. He was like, I'm going to fly to the moon. I'm like, yeah, okay, right. That's not a good idea, Nate. Sorry, that's not going to work. Keep going. And until eventually he said, I'm going to go and sit in the lounge on the blue sofas. Right. I was like, this is a lovely idea, Nate. It's not a great idea, but I told him this. This is great. So when you feel angry, rather than hitting mum, you're going to go and sit on the blue sofas. That's a great, I really encouraged him. And David came and said, David, he's come up with a great idea. This is our strategy we've thought of together and worked it out. And Nathan was totally sold on it. To the point.
Because it was his idea.
To the point where Nathan, this is when the violence stopped, actually. For years, you would find him on the blue sofas. And that was my key to say, what's going on here for you?
Right.
Something going on because you're sitting on those sofas that you don't normally go in that particular room. And so I think that really worked for us, is to work with your child on that behavior and own it together. The other thing is about really trying to repair the relationship and repairing, because these things damage us. They damage our psyche, they damage our bodies, but they damage our psyche. And
but they also damage other family members.
The other family members, they damage
the whole family thing.
They damage the child. So what do we do to repair the relationship? And I think a lot of that happens. I think so often we're so fixed on please will the violence stop that we forget about the bits that happen in between. And those are the bits that will inform what is going to happen in that moment of choice. Do I swing back and hit? So we would say, and this is really difficult, is increasing your presence. Now that might just be like 2 minutes of just sitting with next to your child while they're doing PlayStation. And I did this, I had a really amazing experience of this with Tyler.
Can I just say, it's not just about being present, as you will see when I tell you the difference between Carrie's presence and my presence. Before I too jumped ship, I would sit in and say, you know, you have an issue and here's what I would do if I were you. and it would just be like throwing feathers at a brick wall. It just wouldn't get through. And Carrie then said, just let me show you.
Simple.
Let me show you how to maintain presence.
No time.
Right.
So Tylen would have been 15.
Yeah.
And Tylen had been on suicide watch on and off for 2 years at that point. And I went into his room one day and I sat on the end of the bed and he said, "What are you doing?" Like all teenagers, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just going to sit here for a minute." And Ty got the phone. "Okay, it's been a minute, bye." So I left the room. It's like, "Thank you." So I went in the next day, sat on the end of the bed, and he said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, I'm just here for a minute. And then he was like, "You did this yesterday. Will you stop doing this?" I'm like, it's only 60 seconds. It's fine. Day 3, I upped it to 90 seconds. Over 2 weeks, I got it up to 5 minutes. During that 2 weeks, Ty was like, "Are you going to do that?" He was kind of tolerating me at this point, saying, "Are you going to do that silly thing where you come and you just sit on the end of the bed and we sit in silence? That's like rubbish, Mum. What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just doing it. I'm just here for you, and I'm sitting on the end of the bed." So after 2 weeks, there came a point, and Ty said, "I'm really sad." And at that point, it would have been so easy to come with my 100 strategies and answers. But I realized I didn't have any. So I just said, "I know you're sad. I can see that you're sad. And I can't change that. Unfortunately, if I could, I would. I can't change it. But what I can do is I can sit with you in it." And the tears came. And we sat there for about another 5 minutes. And then I said, "Okay, I'm going to go downstairs now." And he was like, "Thank you." And this became like a little ritual. Every day or so I'd go in there, and some days I'd just sit there and I'd leave after a few minutes. And some days Ty would cry. Some days Ty would talk. Some days Ty would begin to unpack some of that. It took a long while. Ty's autistic, so communication wasn't always easy. And the great thing is that Ty at 23, and actually all the other children, one of the main things they'll do is they'll say, "Mum, can you do that thing where you come and sit on the end of my bed?" Like, how easy is that? Like, it's not difficult. It's not technically difficult. It doesn't cost any money. It costs time. And it's not even like I've got to go for a whole hour of horse riding or something and sit there watching going, "Oh, lovely, you're doing horse riding."
While you're shivering.
You're shivering. It's none of that even. It is when you know you've got 3 other children to care for. It's just a simple thing of being present, choosing to be present in those moments.
The other thing we do is gifts.
Yeah. Well, this starts with no reward.
No rewards.
No rewards. No punishment.
Rewards, and no punishments. We try to adopt that. No rewards, no punishments. And part of the way that that's demonstrated is that every now and again, one of the kids will come home and find something little on the bed. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be.
I think that's sorry to cut across you, Dave. I think that's slightly separate to gifts.
All right.
So basically, a lot of us, particularly with autistic children, would have done a star chart. We love a star chart, but actually, particularly for children with trauma, it's not a good thing. They start, and if they're fostered or adopted, what does it mean if I don't get the star? Tragedy. They imagine disaster. They're catastrophic, aren't they? So it's that thing of that my world will explode if I don't get that star. So punishments and reward, and equally punishments. Gosh, there's only so many things you can take away, right? They've lost sweets, they've got no desserts, they've got no PlayStation, no Wi-Fi, they've got nothing. They've only got oxygen left, and then what are you going to do? Right. So then you've got nothing left to take. So you've got to find you've got to be savvy with it, right? So no rewards, no punishments. But, and this is where what you were saying is right. So that thing,
But then they get the odd gift and they come and go, "Why is this thing on my pillowcase? Why is it there? What have I done?"
99 thing from Asda, piece of Lego.
It's like, what have I done? What did I do?
Yes.
What have I got this? And it's like, "I love you."
This was the most amazing response because they were like, because you realise how much your children think they've got to earn your love.
Absolutely. At the point that,
especially when they're adopted or fostered.
What did I do was always, for ages, with all of them, we started doing it with all of them. They were like, "What did I do?" Nothing. So why have I got a gift?
Yeah.
Because I love you. Because I thought, great. And then we started to really outpsych them. And those that had very unrepaired relationships, I'd say, right, that child, you're going to go and leave something on that one's bed today. And when they ask, it's got a little note saying, love Arlo. Nathan was like, why is Arlo giving me a gift? Because Arlo loves you. We're like, okay.
Yeah, it really
Try
changed the
it.
dynamic.
Honestly,
It really
it's
changed the
absolutely
dynamic.
amazing.
And sometimes
There's-
changing the dynamic, if you've got more than one child, changing the dynamic between the children like that, the sibling, actually really affects the violence.
It did for us. There's
Yeah.
one thing I do want to add in this section that I thought about, that I always talk when I'm doing my speeches and stuff, is what we call the triangle of anxiety. So this is something that was created, actually it wasn't a triangle, it was two things. That pathological demand avoidance, the people that do that in this country, Ruth Fidler, did a piece of work, and she talks about toleration and demand. So if a child's toleration levels are low, you cannot put a demand on them. And if you put that demand on them when their toleration levels are low, you are not going to get a good reaction,
right?
Whether that's violent or whatever that reaction is. So, but what I would say, especially for autistics and those with anxiety, is at the top of that triangle is anxiety. So the relationship between anxiety to toleration to demands to that is going around the whole time.
Yep.
So if they're anxious about going to school, anxiety is rising. I don't have any friends. The teacher doesn't like me. What am I going to do? That bit goes up. Toleration goes down. Demands can't be placed. If you lower the anxiety, toleration goes up, and suddenly, weirdly, demands can happen. So for instance, Tylen went to work on Hollyoaks when he was 16. Hollyoaks gave everyone 2 days autism training. So a lighting rigger on Hollyoaks has had more autism training than any teacher that Tylen's ever had. Do the maths. So Tylen suddenly felt accepted, loved. Suddenly there was no more suicidal ideation. Suddenly they were flourishing. Not because they were on telly, that's just immaterial to Tylen. But the point is, they were traveling to Liverpool every week. Then they could sit backwards on a train. Then they could watch people eat. Then they could eat in front of people.
Yeah, things they couldn't do before.
It's like knocking it out the park at speed. So what happened? Let's analyze that. What was happening there? So anxiety, because Ty was seen and understood, anxiety got lower, toleration went up, demands suddenly can be placed. Now it's like, do you really need your scripts 2 weeks in advance? Because that's quite hard for them. Ty got to doing them, just hand me them out the night before and I'll be fine. So this is the child that was a school refuser, would not go to school for months, barely in school. And so because their anxiety was never addressed, if they had lowered the anxiety, done every step, what needs to be done? That's the big question. What needs to be done to lower the anxiety so that toleration levels go up and then demands can be made? And it is incredible how their resilience grows once the anxiety comes down. That is, and I've seen that in my own life as an autistic person. If I lower my anxiety, my toleration levels go up.
But before we move on, can you explain for those who don't know what you mentioned pathological demand avoidance.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So research shows that most people that are autistic have some level of demand avoidance. We struggle with demands. But then if something is pathological, it's outside the range of normal. So that goes beyond that, which means you have a child that says, I want to go to the Natural History Museum. You go, fantastic, I'm booking tickets. In the morning, they're running a little bit late and you've booked a 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock slot, let's say, let's to make that up, 10. And you know you kind of need to get a move on. So you say, oh, get your shoes on. I'm not going. And then you as a parent go, why did I ask about the shoes? I should have just let them do their shoes at their own speed. But even the tiniest thing can then, it's like cutting your nose off to spite your face. This is their dream thing to do, but they will not do it if you have said,
because you've told them they've got to do something. Because you've told them
they've got to do something. So that you have to parent in, I mean, that's outside of what we're talking about here, but that is just, it's more difficult to navigate and negotiate with a child who has pathological demand avoidance. And I would say that all adopted and fostered children, probably because of trauma, have some level of demand avoidance, not necessarily pathological, but there will be some of that sitting there.
I'm so struck with the triangle that you just spoke about, because I mean, I relate to that. I'm hoping everyone, this is stuff we all understand and we can see examples in our own lives. When we're stressed, the smallest thing can feel too much. So I think we can really get behind that as a methodology to guide us.
And what is it that's causing the anxiety? And are there any things that I can do to mitigate against that anxiety? And often
Yeah.
are things, and they're not necessarily things that cost money. They're things that are, this is what I hear about. It's always like, there's not a budget for it. Like, just be nice. If you're nicer to my kid, actually, they might lower their anxiety.
Absolutely. Just try and understand them.
Yeah.
Is there anything more that you'd like to say at this point about communication? Because you've given us such incredible tips and strategies already.
One of the things absolutely that we learned was a bit of a game changer as well, is how you ask a question. When something has happened, the thing that I would always say is, "But why did you do that?"
Yeah, after an incident, why did
you do that? And we learn to never ask why.
Okay.
So
how
why?
can an 8-year-old say, oh, well, I know what it is. It's because actually this happened when I was a baby, and then I've not really believed in humankind since then, and that's why I've ended up at 8 years old punching you. They can't access that language. They don't have that in their suite of understanding at that point.
No.
So why is a really difficult question.
So why is asking them, like for a feeling? Why? What were you feeling? Let's talk about facts. So we went from why did you do that to can you tell me what happened?
Right.
Just go through what happened.
Just go through what happened yesterday.
Yeah, shaping the story together.
Because I think we've persuaded ourselves as a community that we have to get into the feeling of this. What were you feeling then?
Yeah.
What made you?
I can't access that. Us as adults, it's hard for us as adults. If we're sophisticated, we might be able to access some of that, and that's the journey of growing in wisdom, isn't it? But the other thing is just the word no. The word no.
No. The word no is that science has shown that no tends to get a negative reaction from people. So we avoided saying no. We came up with
it's a visceral response.
It's a visceral response. It's actual physical, it's a mental, it's a psychological response to, can I do that? No. Can I have my dessert now? No. So we avoided saying no. We would say, oh, you can after.
Right.
When we've done this, then we can.
Yeah.
Or perhaps that's not the thing now, but instead, let's do rather than just a
blanket no.
Rather than a blanket no.
If you're parenting 4 kids, you just go, no, sorry, no. And so actually taking the time to go, the answer's not no, but right now, actually so-and-so is on the PlayStation. So should we say 5 minutes? Great. So the answer is yes, in fact. The answer is a big fat yes, but it's going to be in 5 minutes.
Right. That's lovely.
You have to deal with 5 minutes. Now I want to talk about the communication.
Oh yes, talk about that. I love sure.
This. For me, this has been a game changer for conversations I have outside of my kids, between us even.
Yeah, it's been great for us.
So communication model is where you literally repeat what someone says. So say something.
I'm feeling so fed up at the moment.
You're feeling so fed up at the moment.
Nobody likes me.
Nobody likes you.
And I hate them all.
And you hate them all. That's what I'm hearing you tell me. So what would happen? I'd stand outside school, and there was always this little boy, and he was with his mum, and his mum would say, I hate school. He'd be crying. I hate school. I don't want to go in. The teacher hates me. I hate maths. I don't want to go in. And the mum, lovely mum, it's going to be great. Once you get in there, you'll be fine. The teacher loves you.
Yeah, and you know how much you love school,
child goes in screaming. Every morning this child be crying. There was me, 5 back, with Arlo, I don't want to go in. I hate school. The teacher hates me and I hate maths. And I would go, you don't want to go in. The teacher hates you and you hate maths. And Arlo would go, yeah. And then just walk in and stop all the drama.
Yeah.
I'd be like, well, so what happened? Because my child felt heard.
Yeah.
They're coming out with any dramatic language. Mm-hmm. It's really what that's hiding is, I just need you to see me right now. I need you to hear me. I need to know that someone understands the weight that I'm carrying as I walk into this school. And what I'm saying is, even though it sounds brutal saying it back, it's really helpful. And for autistic people, for me, this really helps.
Yes.
That if I say, you really screwed that up today, David. And if he says to me, I'm hearing what you're telling me I really screwed that up today. And then I go, actually, that's a bit mean. I don't really mean you screwed that up, sorry. I mean that when you said that, it really made me feel negative about something. And it helps me to, when someone repeats it back to me, it helps me to clarify, this is my first draft.
Yes.
And then I'm coming with my second draft now.
Yeah,
And
got
when
it.
I'm back, especially because I'm quite blunt and I can blur.
Yes.
So repeating it back is like, help me to shape this.
Yeah, let me refine.
But it's also essential for verbal reasoners, and a lot of us are, that sometimes, as Carrie said, it's first draft. The first thing we say, it doesn't get to the heart of what we mean. It's an introduction. And how often have we had conversations where we ourselves have been arguing about things that were an introductory statement and find ourselves defending something that we don't even necessarily mean?
Yeah, this isn't even what I wanted to say.
This isn't the meat. This is just the hors d'oeuvre.
Now
we're stuck.
Like now we're having a row about something I don't even care about that much.
Got it.
And so if we're like that, how much more children, how much more that I just want to be heard. I just want someone to understand what I feel. And you repeating it back actually is creating for me a belief that you're hearing, you're understanding, you're not denying my reality, you're not trying to change my mind.
Like, for instance, so one of our children is a proper swearing trooper, and will say, you're an effing C. And I will say, I hear what you're telling me. And I'll say it right back. I hear what you're telling me. You're telling me I'm an effing C. That's very hard for them to hold. Because they're like, oh, that really sounds bad when you say it like that, because they're hearing it. So I think that is that
energy is coming back. It was going out.
Language, the abusive language, and saying it calmly. I'm not saying I hear what you're telling me. It's like, I hear what you're telling me. It's like gentle, it's empathetic. You're telling me I'm an effing C. It just sounds like it makes them feel like, that's so cruel what I just said to my mum. I need to just not. So also I think slowing down the conversation. I think that for ADHD brains particularly, there's a lot going on in there. And so slowing, just take a pause between sentences. What I'm trying to say is this. What I think you're saying to me is this. Do you mean this? Helping our children to shape what they're trying to say, and just putting pauses in, because it all goes at speed, doesn't it? Particularly when you're all getting a bit escalated, but to just slow it down can be really, really helpful.
Carrie, David, one of the things that came to mind when you were speaking, the scenario you gave of the lovely mum at the gate who was sort of joining in, trying to make everything nice.
Yeah, she's a great
and
one.
then your different response. I just wondered if you could speak to this, because what I heard was not just that you heard and validated and you gave that time to those feelings. There was something about you that wasn't scared of it. And I'm thinking about that mum at the gate that needs their child to go into school because they need to get the train at 8:10. Or whatever else is going on for them. They need to get the child into school because maybe they just believe that's the best place for them. And I think there's a lot about your confidence in holding this. Yeah, you don't like school. There you go.
Yeah, and I think that's to do with jumping ship. Because I think you've jumped ship. Let me just say this. Normal is an ideology. When people say, but that's not normal behavior. So who decided who decided in history, like a couple of 100 years ago or more, some white man in his 50s, I love you if you're a white man in your 50s, so some white man in his 50s said, this is what we're going to decide how good etiquette and behavior happens. This is what everyone should be like. And somehow sold it to us and we all believed it. So neurotypical became the predominant wonderful way to be.
The gold standard.
And the gold standard. And the rest of us just spend our lives trying to get as close as we can to it, whether we're masking or, neurotypical passing, whatever. But in whatever way we can. And certainly we talk about the immigrant thing of the model minority. We've come to this country, you need to behave just like do better than the people around you because we're depending on you to do that. So there's pressure, cultural pressure, there's gender and sexuality pressure, there's all this pressure to be like this tiny little group of people in the middle. Like, we need to just blow that up in terms of thinking, I mean. So that normal is an ideology. Let's just switch that up a bit and say, actually, it's great to be neurodivergent. I love living in my family. They are super different, and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. As difficult as it can be sometimes, they are absolutely brilliant.
And we all want our children to fit in, but actually us hearing them and them knowing they are heard is the best way, I think, for them to feel that them being them, whatever that is at that moment, feeling like they feel at that moment, it's okay. It's acceptable. It's not a deal breaker.
Yeah.
You can feel this, and I'm responding to you the way that you're feeling, but without the energy. I'm slowing it right down, and you're going, ah, and I'm going, oh, what you're saying is, I'm not giving you the same energy back, but
they will occasionally say, can you stop doing that thing when you say what I say?
Yeah, I bet. Absolutely.
We already do this. So that can happen. But generally speaking, I think that definitely works for us.
Yes.
But you've taken us through some tips and strategies. But I just want to look at for a moment, and we really are running out of time, but for some parents on here, they're worried about their pets, their other children, their own well-being. Is there anything that you could say that might offer some kind of support?
I think checking in with the children, particularly that older child, often, or it actually doesn't have to be older child. In our instance, it's the older child, and it's often is, but any child that is not the child with the issue, as it were. I hate calling children, I don't hate referring it, but you understand what I was trying to say. That child will develop a sense of, I can see my parents are having to go to hospital every day for Thailand. So I've actually got my own thing going on, but there's no space for me to say my things going on.
I'm not going to burden them with my
parents
stuff.
are lovely, and I love them, and that's how our children feel about us, which is lovely. They're really doing their best, and I can see they're struggling. So I will be the perfect child. And of course, they can't maintain that, and they were never called to that. So I think it's taking moments, when I began to see this is affecting my oldest child, I need to also go and sit on the end of that one's bed and go, what's happening? Yeah. Should we sit for a bit? Should we just stay silent today? Yeah, let's just sit in silence. And just taking a moment to do that, which, I know being present is one of the hardest things to be, and it's exhausting.
Yes.
Sometimes we are geographically present, but we've checked out. And that can lead to what we call blocked care, where parents become completely blocked. So they're caring for their child in practical ways. I provide you with dinner, I put your uniform on, I drop you off at school. But apart from that, I'm mentally exhausted. And we need to acknowledge that is valid. And when people say, you know what, the last thing I want to hear when I feel like that is someone saying, have you done some self-care? It's just like, are you actually joking? I've got, on any school day at the time, this is going back 10 years, I've got one who's got to get to a train station who's late. I've got the next one who needs an hour of therapy before they'll get out of bed. I've got another one who's asking to be dressed under the quilt and will not let their body be seen, but I've got to get all their clothes on. And then I've got a fourth one who's just hit me. So really, and I've got to get to work, or David's not there, or whatever, and anyone who's single parenting, my gosh, I salute you. You are amazing. We need to just give you a moment, because you are absolutely incredible. So yes, self-care. Yes, I'd love to do self-care. Do I do it? I do it a little bit more now, but there was a period of time, like literally, come on, it's not going to happen. There's not an hour in a day.
And we urge you, please don't compromise your core belief. You are a good parent. Too often we measure, the metric by which we measure the validity of our parenting and the quality of our parenting is in our children. And actually, it's in the love that we give.
The SCND parents, you're the best ones out there for sure. Yes. I have never met an awful SCND parent. You're the best. The best, the most learned, the most willing to learn, the most wanting to get it right. You're all sitting here now because you care. So yes, you're great. And don't compromise, even if you're told on the daily by your kid, you're terrible, you're awful. Well, that's your opinion. But inside, I'm holding on to the fact that, you know what, I'm knocking it out the park here. And that I'm not even going to compromise on that. For me, that's a definite. The other thing is to remind yourself who you are, particularly if you're an empath. You climb into the skin of your child, and this really relates to some of the suicidal ideation thing, is that you're so desperate for your child to be heard and change and move away from the behaviors they're doing that you climb into their skin. And it's important that you climb out again. Yes. And you look yourself in the mirror. I know for me, sometimes I literally have looked in the mirror and gone, I'm Carrie, I'm not Tylen, I'm not Nathan, I'm not this child. I've actually got my own identity that isn't suicidal, that isn't violent, that isn't all these things that are happening around me and going off right now. I am my own person, and I still can own that and be that.
And also, sometimes the very shame that surrounds this thing of child on parent violence prevents us, prohibits us, and inhibits us from doing something that's really important. And that is to create a village, to create a family, a chosen family, people who will support us, people who care, people who you can say, these people know what is going on in this household. These people know that you're violent towards me. I'm not keeping it secret. I am not
protecting. They're your champions.
Yeah, I'm not protecting you, because you're not protecting. In many ways, in doing so, you're not enabling necessarily, that's too strong, but you're not protecting. The reality is that you need support, and there must be people around who you can say, this is what's happening, who'll say, do you want me to come round? Not do you want me to come round to be a human shield, but just to be there, because the power, increased presence, the power of that child knowing these people know what I do, it can have a real impact. And too often we're shamed into silence. We're shamed into secrecy.
So I think that's one. And also that's kind of like raising champions around you. But I think also, I know at one point, like our autism group has been amazing. No one gives each other solutions, really. They're just mainly just sharing their stories. And then I started a little group. I'm seeing them tomorrow, actually. There was a point where I had a couple of friends who had quite troubled teenagers, and the suicidal thing was going on for us. And so we felt like this is a bit difficult in our group to talk about this stuff, because some of them have got like 5-year-old daughters, and they're like, is this going to happen with mine? Yeah. And so we just started a little dog. I even got 2 dogs, so I could go dog walking group. And we could talk, just us 3, walking around the park, twice around the park. It's such a great group. That was just a little triplet. So having those relationships with people that get it, I think is, even if it's one other person that you can share that with, whether that's an online group, Facebook groups even, there's a lot of good stuff happening on Facebook. And I'm sure, Debbie, you've, all the groups that we've over the last few weeks tried to pull in to create that resource.
And each of us need in our lives places and people with whom we can describe without having to explain.
Yeah.
Thank you. Describe without having to explain.
I don't have to explain all the backstory. Yeah. Like today, I can give you guys the headlines because you get it.
And we can see from the chat that so many people are getting it and feel heard and seen and validated. I think we need to go to questions. I think there are a lot of them in the Q&A. The first question I can see is there a forum for parents to meet up digitally? Well, there may be things, but certainly we have put on 2 extra groups with Carrie and David that's more like an open Q&A. I know the first one is virtually sold out now, but the second one is on the 17th of December at 7 p.m. If you haven't already, head to our website, get your seat, because there were only a few places left at the start of this evening. Carrie, David, are there any other groups that you know about when we're thinking about?
I think just in terms of online stuff, parenting mental health on Facebook, that group is very good, and everything on that, from the suicidal ideation, autism, school refusal, not fine in school is also a really good one. There's a lot. Just put in any search engine, autism, ADHD, see what comes up on Facebook. There are some really good groups. And then there are of course, the support groups that are out there. And I think for us, I don't know if anyone else experienced this, but I know when I was first being hit again, so this would have been 2022, 21 and 22. I remember typing in child's hitting mother. I didn't even know child on parent violence and abuse. I didn't know those words. I didn't have a language for it. I just put in child hitting mother, and it came up. The first thing I saw, and it was the same on everything for about 3 or 4 pages, said, you need to leave. And I was like, hang on a minute. They're all talking about husband hitting a wife apart, you know, male to female, specifically male to female, actually. It wasn't even the other way around, just male to female violence. And I just thought, this is so great for people that need that, but this is not what where's the stuff for children on parents?
Yeah.
And so I really couldn't find anything that was out there. But since my journey, and there have been groups out there and I didn't find them, and they have been there for a while. I'm aware of that now. And so we're going to do a we're going to do a resource with all of those names on, but David's just saying this. Honestly, I don't care about book sales, really not that bothered, but this book does have a lot of
It's got loads and loads of strategies. Loads more that we can talk about here.
Loads
It's
of stuff. If you've got a child
on
suddenly
Audible.
come out as trans, or you've got a child, or you think, actually, I think my child might not just be autistic, I think there might be an ADHD, or there's a bit of dyscalculia in there, or it's literally...
Or there's just simply the violence that we've been talking about as well.
But it is a real book of hope. That's our main thing, is like, and we're like that with our group. Don't lose hope. Please don't lose hope. We know that this is really extreme. We know that we're all living in times that we'll look back on and say, how did we survive that? But you will look back on it and say, how did we do that? And we got through. You will get through. You will get through. You do. Things change. When I look at our 23-year-old now, you know, having done Hollyoaks and no longer been on Suicide Watch, finished with Hollyoaks, we're like, will he ever work again? He's just finished at the National Theatre. We're like, not, and it doesn't have to, that's a super job. It could be just like Arlo working in the reptile shop one day a week. It doesn't bother me what it is, but they've got purpose. They've got a reason to live. They've got a job and a friend, and that's all that matters.
Oh my gosh, this resonates so deeply for us as a suicide prevention charity. Everything that you're saying is what we talk about too. Somebody has asked about the Freedom Programme, and just in case it's relevant to other people on the call, is that something you've ever come across?
No, I don't think. Okay. I think that's an area where David and I are not clued up, because I tried to find people and try to find out what was out there. And so there are a few groups that we've had, but no, I mean, just keep adding them to the chat, add them to wherever you see it. If you see, put them on my Facebook, because there's lots of people are tuning into that at the moment to talk about this subject, or the Ollie Foundation also.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for these comments. So just like...
They're amazing, aren't they? Somebody asks about your assertion of striking when the iron is cold, and they said, but what if it never even gets to, like, what if it's always hot? Violence going on throughout the day. Was that an experience you had at all?
I think that can be violence throughout the day, or it can be striking when the iron's cold if a child just does not understand what you're trying to say. Certainly one of our children who's autistic, but every time you go back and say, let's just talk about this, it makes another explosion. So that is not going to work for that child. So what I would say for that child is, I just need to increase my presence. And I noticed this recently, because they're now, this is Arlo, they're 18, nearly 19. They've been in an autism school. They were out for 3 years. Now they've got a great school. They've still got trauma, but they're thriving compared with where they were. And then they had a bit of a moment, a big moment, actually. A big moment a couple of weeks ago. Craziness went on. And I said, I think perhaps, Arlo, that you and me need to go and do date night once a week. I think maybe I've missed out on just spending some time with just you on your own. I thought, and they said, their little eyes lit up and they said, I'd love to do that. So we went out a couple of weeks ago, just 2 weeks ago. They put their phone down. They didn't have their headphones in or have their phone.
This is like unheard of.
That's unheard of. They sat there and they talked with me, or we ate, and it was great because it was over food. And then last week, I didn't get a chance to do it. Got to Saturday and they said, well, we're going to need to go out because we haven't done it this week. And I was like, I didn't realize how much this child was relying on that. So we went out on Monday and had another lovely time. And I really have to commit myself to that. It's an hour, pop up the road. It doesn't have to be expensive food, or even if I don't know how we do that cheaply, and I'm talking about privilege because I'm able to go into McDonald's or whatever, but being able to just sit and listen and hear and see what's on their mind, they really enjoy it. I was absolutely shocked. So yes, instead of tracking while the iron's cold, repair the relationship, build the relationship, because then when that relationship builds, they'll find it harder to be abusive. That one was abusive language, so they'll find it harder to call me the FMC at that point.
Can I also say that there have been so many questions. These questions are really amazing in the comments as well. We will be doing another session, won't we? Where we're just going to be dealing with and looking
with the questions
and trying to respond to the questions. So please come back again, because these do need answering, and they need, you know, batting back and forth, and we're here for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I know what you were just talking about. It reminds me, you know, in suicide prevention, that you often hear people say, you know, also look out for your friends that feel fine and look happy and, you know, are always there for you. Look out for them as well.
I'm trying to read the comments.
Thank you.
I'm seeing is that someone has said here, there wasn't a question, but they're commenting on the fact that their child is fine in school and then really violent when they get home. And research shows that if a child is fine in school and then they're violent at home, it's because it's a problem in school. So they're masking, and then so just to, because I think what happens is often is this crazy notion that it must be, well, there's not a problem at school, it must be you.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry when you face that.
Yes,
literally,
because we've been there. Yeah, where they say if they're great with us and they're not great with you, then we're doing something that you need to learn.
Yeah,
you're the problem. And how many parents, how many people who've been on this today have been told or made to feel like they're the problem?
You're not the problem.
You're not.
In fact, your child isn't the problem. Often the system is the problem. Yes. I feel like the biggest battle I have is not trying to work with my child. That bit is not easy, but it's manageable. The systems, we haven't even talked about that. That's where it becomes impossible. And I'll
tell you what, children, you know, who don't fall into any of the things we've been talking about today, if they are in, well, if they're in education, they are probably having to keep still, be quiet, follow rules, and when they come out, they take it out on whoever they feel safe to take it out.
And people are saying that here. My son hitting me is his safe space. I just read.
And what was it you were told? I think you should share it. It's shocking.
The social worker said to me, Carrie, I just want you, like I wasn't being empathetic. Carrie, I just want you to imagine what it would be like for Nathan if he killed you. And I, at that point, I said, can I not imagine that? Is that okay? I'd like to actually retain just 1% of my own autonomy as a human being and say, I'm not going to let him kill me.
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to let that happen, not because it will hurt him, but because I have a choice to live. And that is, please don't give up on your own autonomy, your own agency. You are still a human. Just because you're a parent, you know, that thing of, well, you've got to put up with this because your child's traumatized by early life stuff. It's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. Someone's asking, what do you do when their child follows you from room to room? That's a really hard one, isn't it?
Oh.
I have had that as well with Nate. I think perhaps saying, can we find a bit of space in just a moment? You can be angry, but can we take a moment? I think that's what I would do. I have had that where a child is in the middle of trashing something or trying to put where the kettle boils, trying to put it on, grab the kettle, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got rid of every knife. There's literally, I can't even cut a piece of bread in my house. There's not knives anywhere. There's nothing that you can possibly hurt someone with, really. But of course there's always stuff, isn't there? And I think, how do you step in and not get yourself hurt or them get hurt? Restraint is something we haven't talked about tonight. We talked about how is it that all the professionals are allowed to restrain, and we as parents can't restrain. So I basically just have to get hit.
And we're getting so many
difficult.
mixed messages.
Police would come and police would be like, why didn't you push him away? Paramedics would say, don't touch him. Like, well, what do I do? So our risk assessment was, David is a black man and had so much judgment. So he's going to go to a different floor of the house and he's going to call the police, and I will take the blows until the police arrive. And that was a risk assessment.
The first question would always be, and Mr. Grant, where were you when this was happening?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And Mr. Grant, what did you do before this happened? What did you say? What were you doing?
Yeah, I was out at work. Yeah, I just arrived home.
I wasn't here. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
You can do restraint training. Yes, you can. I think it takes more than a couple of sessions, though. And I think there are, like you said, restraint reduction network too. Things when you're driving is really difficult. I was just reading about that. Yes, we've had that. Children trying to get out the car when you're driving. You have to, yeah, there is a kind of autism ADHD tax that we talk about, which is today's not working. It's just not. We can't do this. You book theatre tickets and you don't get to go. You book something nice, you don't get to go. And that is just part of life, that lots of stuff gets cancelled because, you know, it just, that's how it is. It's how
you're driving out to somewhere and you get a phone call, and before you even get out of the car, you turn around and drive back.
Right.
Houdini seatbelt. I've not heard of that. See, this is what I love. The parents have got all this stuff. They know.
That sounds what Houdini seatbelts we were given. That's fantastic. I'm going to look that up.
Everyone's on Amazon now.
Yeah, Houdini get your Houdini seatbelt.
Thank you for thanking us, and I just can't even thank you enough, because our voices are heard when we do this kind of thing. But I'm super aware that your voice is still sitting there in your house. But I want you to know that somehow we are connected. Somehow we're facing the same things. We all walk out the lounge that we're sitting in, or the space that we're sitting in, not knowing what's going to happen to a certain extent, don't we? Yeah.
Carrie, David, one of the questions is about how we can support professionals, particularly educate schools. And what it seems to me is that I'm surprised schools are not looking for more education when we think about the number of teachers who are struggling with the same things that you're struggling with. You mentioned before how, you know, a room could be emptied within moments.
By a 5-year-old.
Actually, do you know what? That school were amazing. And in fact, they allowed us to go in and teach nonviolent resistance to the teachers.
Oh, wow.
That's something, right? What did that cost? Nothing, nada. There you go. All these things are meant to cost a fortune. I didn't. Parents that were clued up went in and taught it and passed it on, and it really helped. So I think basically we all know the system is broken. That's been being said from, you know, we've been in this game a long while. That we know. The system is broken. So what happens when a system is broken is that people turn against one another. So teachers will go, the damn parents, can't engage them. They just don't care, can't engage them. And then you get damn parents, they're in our faces all the time. So how come we're both not engaging and in their faces? So there's a kind of blame game that goes on, and there are teachers that are amazing and doing great work. So how do we bridge that gap when we've been set against each other? And this is where co-production really, really matters. Co-producing, work together, so that and remember that parents always come onto your territory if you're a professional. Even if you're in our house, you're the ones that lead in those meetings. So we are always coming to you feeling very odd, very judged, very
scared,
anxious, scared, all of those things. And it's for you to be hospitable, put our minds at rest, help us. One of the things that I talk about a lot is give me the rule breaker in the meeting, because change cannot happen until people are prepared to break rules. And by break rules, I don't mean like have a party during COVID. I mean stuff like, we don't normally do this.
But
we haven't done that before, but those are the sentences we need to start hearing. That's creative thinking. That's entrepreneurial thinking. That's where stuff happens. When there is no budget, the creatives start to invent new stuff. That's disruption. That's what happens. And if you want to effect change, someone in the room has got to say, we don't normally do this. We haven't tried that before, but let's have a go. And if you get all the parties in the room co-producing well together, and accepting that sometimes you will fail and you have to be flexible and sometimes it won't work first time. All of those things, change can happen, and we have seen that happen so many times.
And that's essential because, you know, we have so many people. I'm reading these comments. I'm seeing people who are experts by experience, experts in their child. And also on this chat, there have been professionals, healthcare professionals, social work professionals, educational professionals who equally want to help the child.
Yeah.
The divide.
There's amazing professionals. Let me just reiterate that. I did say it. There are amazing professionals. There are people that know their stuff, love them, the experts. There are people that are willing to learn, that know nothing. I love you too. The tricky ones are the ones that think they know but don't know. And they're the ones that say, Kylan's not autistic. No, definitely not.
And parents are the great unused resource.
Yeah.
They are the great untapped resource. These parents who are parent experts in their children, rather than being told what to do and being told how they're wrong, how about getting them in and asking them and working with them,
if you can,
and the child as they explain. So
if a child comes up with the idea, they're invested in it, the same as Nathan on the blue sofas. Once Nathan knew, when I get those bubbly feelings, I'm going to go and sit on the blue sofas. He had a strategy. He thought of it. It wasn't my idea, it's his. So he was empowering himself in that moment. So yeah, definitely, if you can include the kids.
I've seen a lot of questions around anxiety, around the triangle, around some of the other things you've spoken about, and the questions are all the same. What if the child doesn't know what's making them anxious? And we see this a lot in the relinquishment piece, and in many cases of trauma with anyone, especially children. You said it yourself, Carrie, that there isn't the sophistication of articulation of language, but many times, even if there were, there sometimes it just doesn't feel safe, does it?
No.
To talk about things. So, you know, people are saying, well, how do you do this if you don't know what the anxiety comes from? And when I was thinking about what your answer would be, I was sure it was going to be something around just sit on the end of the bed for a minute, up it by a few seconds. What else would you give people?
I think it's for everyone around your child to observe. I think if you begin to observe your child, you begin to see stuff that perhaps you hadn't seen. If you're intentionally observing them, what happens in these little moments that lead up to dinner or lead up to getting out the car or going into the car or going to school? What is happening in those moments, and what stuff can I mitigate against? What stuff can I shift out the way that might make things easier? Like, for instance, you know, a child will say, I hate school, but often when they break that down, they might have a teacher that doesn't like them. Actually doesn't.
Yes.
Or they might think, but it can happen. So the teacher's relationship with the child is one. Actually, before that is the atmosphere in the classroom. How many classrooms do you walk into and there's literally bits of paper on every wall? That's overwhelming. Stuff hanging off the ceiling. So you know, it's meant to look like Aladdin's cave. For our autistic and ADHD kids and traumatized kids, this is a complete overwhelm. I've not even got in the classroom. So atmosphere is really important. The environment, relationship with the teacher, relationship to the subject, and relationship with friends. Those are the four things: relationship to environment, teacher, friends, and subject. Working on each of those as separate things to try and work out which bit is the anxiety. There's also, and this is so interesting, someone just talked about non-verbal, absolutely, 100%. So we know that the amygdala in the back of the brain is that bit that's like we sometimes refer to as the lizard brain. And that's the bit that's receiving all this information. That is the bit of our brain that gets triggered. I'm triggered by this. That's the bit where we go, that moment, fight or flight. This part of the brain doesn't have language. And we have to remember that. So all of that is happening. It's pre-verbal. And so for all of us, so when we are triggered or something happens, of course we don't have words for it because it's happening in a part of our brain that doesn't have language. And it's the journey from the back of the brain to the front of the brain to the white matter that processes through those parts of the brain that process that information. So it's how do we get them out of me, I'm autistic, how do I get from that response to what's happening in the back of the brain to make a reasoned thought about this? How do I do that? And for me, I feel like I've worked my neural pathways. I feel like I have slowed stuff down. Okay, I'm triggered. I'm not going to respond to this trigger. I can feel it in my body, but I'm just acknowledging, okay, I'm feeling that in my body. That's uncomfortable. Okay, I'm agreeing. That's uncomfortable. That's a really uncomfortable feeling. What's going on for you? Start to challenge it. What's happening here? We need to do that for ourselves as adults. I've only learned to do that in the last 15 years. But for our children, it's the same. So how do they communicate with us when a lot of what is happening, even for all children, is happening right at that back of the brain? I think that is a challenge. I think that is a challenge. It's finding creative ways. David and I do quite a bit of work with Nordorf and Robbins and music therapy. And suddenly the child is not speaking, is not verbally speaking, but is just communicating massively through instruments, through drama, through dance, through art, through horse riding, through anything that you can lay your hands on.
Yes.
Children want to communicate. They do. Sometimes our children, they're slow to communicate, they're late to communicate, or they struggle to communicate for whatever reason.
All behavior is communication as well.
Right?
Yes. Needs met or not met.
Yes.
Yeah. And I always hate that thing, behaviors that challenge. I'm always like, challenge who?
Yeah.
Challenge
but there's the learning, isn't it? Because
right?
if it's challenging you, yeah.
Why is it challenging you? Work out how to mitigate against that for yourself. How do I stop that challenging me? How do I work that out? It's as much of a journey of discovery for the child as it is for us going, okay, how do I work that one out? That's made me feel really awful. Yeah.
Amazing session, people are saying, and people are just feeling so validated listening to you.
Thank you for hearing us.
Thank you.
It's really
Thank
helpful
you.
for us.
Thank you.
Is there, we all agree hope is key, and no matter how bad things are, we are hopeful that things will, they'll get their job, they'll find some peace. How would you like to tie this up this evening? What would you like to say to people?
Do you know, it's so interesting because I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my sweatshirt and all I can see is our rage. And part of me wants
see our
rage. And I do think courage is about being able to have places where you can show up. And that means you might be raging. It's quite likely you're raging and you would be valid to be raging. We can't take it out on our kids, we know that. So, but there should be spaces where we can be open about how difficult it is. And there should be spaces where we can rage and it be okay.
Yes, 100%.
Because that really is courage. That's really showing yourself like, I meant to look like a great parent, but I'm like, right now.
I think you have given a lot of people permission to feel their rage this evening, to know that they're loved, to know that they're not alone. David, I am absolutely going to take you up on the hint that we might be able to do a little more than we've already offered people. That would be amazing. Everybody, the questions you have will definitely inform not only our future discussions, but where we can answer them in the resource that goes out to you, we will.
I want to say also, Debbie, so I've been so inspired, encouraged to see so many men on here as well. So often it seems that we as men, we feel designed to fix things. We feel that, whether that's true or not.
Yeah.
And some of these things, they're just not things that will be fixed. They're things that will be worked through. They're things that are part of a process. To see so many guys here saying, I love the kids. I really want to get this right. I really want to deal with this. I really want to resolve this is an incredible thing.
Yeah. Yes. We talk a lot, Ollie, through work we do with a men's wellbeing coach about this very strong protect the cave response, which is strong for all of us, but for men it seems part of the purpose.
Yes.
And if you're not protecting the cave, that must feel
Like
very dangerous.
Another reason not to follow normal ideology.
absolutely. Let's get rid of
Thank
it.
you, Carrie.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I love the non-binary space. I'm like, wow, yeah, now we're really out there because we've just got rid of the binary. And I think, and I'm not just talking about gender, I mean, just in so many ways, black and white thinking is not helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. This was like respite care for David and I.
Thank you. Thank you. This is, you know what, for an incredibly challenging, tough conversation, this has been an absolute joy. And I know, as difficult as it is, it has been joyful for everyone that's listened. You've given them so much with your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for giving
you.
us the space.
Thank you.